Hi, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of BCO's new series where BCO members will chat to the next generation of the industry. And I'll maybe do a quick introduction to myself. My name is Gillian Stewart. I am not NextGen at all. I am probably 39 years in the business of interior design and architecture, and I am the chair of the BCO committee in Scotland. And today I'll be chatting to Savannah de Savary, and Savannah has an amazing CV for such a young person. She's the founder of and the CEO of Built ID, and Forbes. You were the Forbes 30, one of the 30 under 30 social entrepreneurs. Is that correct, Savannah?
That was, yes.
Yeah, and you were one of BCO's NextGen PropTech Company of the Year award winners in 2019. So, I mean, welcome to you, and thanks so much for giving us your time today. And I wondered if you could first do a bit of an introduction to yourself and Built ID to try and help me understand what it does, and if you could provide a brief history, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So Built ID is a social impact tech company. So what we're really focused on is trying to leverage technology to make the built environment a sort of more socially impactful place, and make it easier actually for decision makers. Specifically, what we do is make it easier for them to connect with communities and actually listen and collaborate with the people who are going to be impacted by their work. So what we do is we enable diverse community voices, whether that's an occupier community or a local neighborhood community, to shape the places where they live, work, play, shop, and learn. And that's really what we focus on with it. It's a tool called Give My View. It's essentially, at its root, it's just a gamified survey software. But what it does, it makes it really fun, easy, and most importantly, impactful for a community to be able to actually look at a sort of a variety of pre-qualified ideas or potential floor plans or whatever it may be, and interactively give their feedback, give their view, I suppose would have been a better way for me to say that.
Yeah, no, that sounds really interesting. And obviously, within the planning system, there's an element of community consultation anyway. But what you described there sounds like it's something that actually could reach a whole lot more people. So generally, community consultation might be town halls if they're allowed, thinking outside COVID, but and giving it relies on the community to be active participants, to go along and listen and comment almost like a reactive way, rather than considering something and then thinking of a considered response to it and connecting to perhaps their friends or their immediate community. So it sounds like something that could totally complement what happens anyway.
Yes, what we find is that we try and say we're trying to reach that silent majority, the sort of people that have neither the time nor really the inclination to go to a town hall style meeting. So we make it quick and fun for them to engage. What we also actually do is make it less intimidating.
Yeah.
So what it is that you don't have to write or speak in a public forum about your views. Actually, you're able to share them anonymously if you want to. We have, geofences and all these technical ways to make sure it's the right people engaging. And actually, you don't see how the rest of the community have voted until you've shared your own opinion. And that's really powerful for stopping people living in these echo chambers where we think everyone must have the same priorities as me. It actually took, I think it was actually my dad who said to me quite early doors in the first lockdown, when I was like, well, this is bliss. And he said, you need to remember, not all your employees are going to be as antisocial as you are, Savannah, and a hermit. It's not going to be bliss for everyone. You need to be thinking very seriously about, how you keep them feeling connected and empowered and motivated. And it's that same sort of thing. If you only talk to people who have the same preferences and priorities as you do, you actually miss out on understanding your wider community's priorities.
And actually, you get very, very introverted and very, very insular within that echo chamber. The echo chamber terminology is something my two daughters use all the time. It's like you can communicate with your own network of virtual friends or connections, and it just reinforces, perhaps in a dangerous way, a way of thinking, or a kind of, you can go down a rabbit hole basically. So it's an opportunity to you need an opportunity to step back and see the wider picture. And how
exactly.
So Built ID was established 2015. So that's
it was
5 years, 6 years.
It was. God, it feels like 20. Yes, it was established in 2015, And then actually we were firstly focusing on actually who is behind the projects in the built environment and trying to democratize that process of young up and coming talent being able to be found and identified by their work. And we had this huge growing library of project inspiration and who was behind it. And it was actually the chief planner for the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government who approached me and said, you have all this amazing inspiration for how positive, new development can be for a community. Is there a way to leverage it to help with the planning process? And so that's how we started to Give My View. We launched with sort of Grosvenor and RBKC, so public and private sector, in early 2019. And it just sort of took off quite astonishingly quickly. And it was maybe in late 2019 or late 2019, because it was before, God, I'm trying to remember when this COVID pandemic, we feels like it's again been at least 15 of the 20 years I've been doing it.
Yeah.
Where actually we got approached by one of the the biggest, the most sort of biggest buildings, commercial buildings in the City of London, by the owner saying, look, we've seen what you're doing with planning, so we work a lot for the city and also obviously for developers there. And actually we're going to be doing, for our actual occupier engagement, we really want to integrate something into our app which goes beyond a typical survey and really lets them help shape how we're going to be redoing our public realm space, which is currently a bit of a wind tunnel, and we want to actually empower them to be a part of the process. And that's how we actually started to turn our attention to occupier engagement. And funnily enough, the same with the other direction we've gone in, which is clean energy. We had community members who'd done these surveys and shared their views, reaching out and saying, we'd love to actually have this for the work we do in clean energy. And that's how we expanded internationally. And with I think it was a big offshore wind farm in Dublin was our first international project for RWE. And that again came from community members actually saying, I like being empowered, and why shouldn't actually the stakeholders in my business be empowered as well? And that's really how it's sort of grown. I'd love to say there was some genius strategy towards our expansion, but it really was, I guess, quite appropriately community led.
Yeah.
And also it just really, there's no limit to how you can apply it. It all comes down to behavioral psychology, not just how we've gamified it. So the more people engage and share their views and their preferences, the more points they accrue, which they can then give to a hyper local social initiative at the end of sort of their survey. But also actually at its more basic level, the reason why it works is because in behavioral psychology, there's something called the Ikea Effect. And it's that all humans have this subconscious bias where we place more value on something that we've helped you build or create, irrespective of whether the outcome is actually better. And so it doesn't matter if it's that crappy Ikea bookcase you put together and you're really reluctant to get rid of it, even though it's actually it's not that good compared to something you could have bought. But actually you can apply that to the built environment and say, okay, we can make people feel emotionally invested in the places where they work and the places where they live and shop if we actually just let them be part of that process. And so that's why it's sort of started off with planning and sort of is now looking really to expand beyond that too.
Yeah, no, you're dead right. I mean, my experience as an interior designer is, you have to engage with the people that you are designing for. If you don't, you won't succeed. You might get the best building in the world that's an award winner, but actually, if it doesn't meet the needs of the community of people you're designing for, then it fails, and it's a waste of time and energy and money. So absolutely rooted in our design practice is always about understanding the various different stakeholders that you have within a project, whether you're directly employed by them or not. So the community, the wider, local authority planning, all of that is incredibly important to get that moving in. And the point you make about if you are invested in it and if you get involved, then you then feel more. It's something that you've helped for.
But it's just actually letting people know that you're listening to them on their terms.
Yeah, and it's
employers
inclusive.
are increasingly increasingly having to do that. So as a landlord, actually, rather than just engaging those few key decision makers who make the call about whether they want to renew their lease, if you actually engage the people that they're accountable to trying to keep happy in order to have staff retention and productivity, you can go a long way actually with actually meeting your goals and theirs simultaneously.
Yeah, and then it's a win-win, isn't it? Absolutely. Yes, and how people respond to imagery is very, very personal, isn't it? But it's that level of diversity of personality that you need to be mindful of. So you're right. So some people really might respond well to a really, a positive buzzy image, but others might actually feel that, but it is too intimidating. And what I really need is somewhere quiet, somewhere that I can
Mm.
retreat to, somewhere where I know I'm going to be safe and get a level of thinking done that needs to be important. So it's just helps identify that it's not one shoe fits all, and there's a
Mm.
variety of people out there. So that's fantastic. Do you have a database of project types? Because I would have thought that it's something that across the world you could almost tap into. So examples of community-led projects, that whether it is to do with green energy or a garden city or something like that, that you could actually tap into and share that knowledge a bit. I mean, obviously you need to monetize it, but
Absolutely. Well, that's exactly what we have. Both from prior to launching Give My View, we have over 100,000 projects showing that precedent of where things have been done, that best in practice, and who is behind it. Also, we also let communities actually and occupiers understand who are the designers, who are the people who are shaping the space, what have they done before. So again, feel more of that personal relationship, like they're
yeah,
change makers
yeah,
alongside the design team.
yeah,
And we actually also, we've worked on so many projects now that we started to realize with this wealth of information on what different demographics, we do a lot of demographic segmentation, what they really resonates with them. And so what we have actually done is we've created this tool, which is essentially, we just call it rather uninspiredly, just the question library. But essentially, it's all of the questions that have been asked, and you can segment it by thematically or by different, project types to understand what questions are resonating. And then we have some great experts like Ben Channon, for example, who wrote Happy by Design and is, very involved with Well in the
mhm,
UK, who wrote a series of questions for us around which our clients could use to actually really hone in on what is going to make this a space that supports and fosters wellness, and
mhm.
not just physical but also mental wellness. And so that's quite powerful as well, as something that we're really focused on, is making sure that
Yeah,
our clients have basically like a ready to go library of questions which they can then benchmark against how other demographics have answered on
yeah,
different projects too. I think that's really important, that we all learn
yeah,
from each other.
yeah, absolutely. And I truly believe that every day is a school day. I mean, even at my age, because if you don't learn, if you don't evolve, if you don't improve, then what's the point? So there's no point in treading water. No, absolutely. And I think it's capturing the real stories sometimes. It's this kind
Mm.
of real, the brilliant stories. We did this project behind me was a project that we did for the City of Glasgow College. So two big um, uh, college buildings, one at the river on the Clyde and one on Cathedral Street. And there was a brilliant story about success of that project. So the one on Cathedral Street is the biggest campus, and it's right next to a classic Glasgow City Council tower block. And the principal of the college met this old boy like in a flat cap with a stick walking through the main kind of thoroughfare, and he showed him to an easily accessible lift, because the guy wasn't particularly able in terms of walking, and he took him down in the lift and he said, why are you in the college building? It's brilliant to see you. Are you thinking of enrolling? And he said, well, I think I might. He said, but actually the main reason for me using your college, I can get to the butchers and stay dry. So basically he was, and but he used to see him in the cafe where the students did the catering, where they did and he saw him like every day having his morning coffee there, and that for him was a gem of a measure of success that never would have been predicted when the
Mm.
college was initially conceived. It was the way that the community actually embraced it and used it almost as a thoroughfare to connect one part of the city to the other. So it's all of these little nuggets, these little gems that just make it real for people, don't you think?
And I think that's what placemaking really is. It's sort of now just become jargon, but actually placemaking isn't a bunch of experts sitting in some, sort of office thinking about, a philosophical level, what placemaking is going to be. It's actually about activating the people who are going to be impacted by that
Yeah,
project and what can it do to be a net benefit. And I always say when we're doing the planning projects, what's interesting, it's not your massing, it's not your height or anything like that, your design that actually resonates in the community care most about. Yes, you have the sort of NIMBY minority who that's what they're really upset about. The majority of people we find, regardless of age or geographic location or ethnicity, on the projects we've done, they care most about sustainability and combating social isolation. And what that means is most of our projects, actually, what the community get most excited about giving feedback on and engaging with has nothing to do with what has to be decided for planning. It's actually about, if we get planning, how can we activate the space, the public realm, the ground floor activation? And you get, without exception, if you ask a question saying, are there any sort of events or social initiatives that you would like to not even attend, run if we have a flexible space on the ground floor? You get hundreds of responses. And what's amazing is we did a project recently in a city where a developer asked a question around that and around social ventures. And they had, I think it was something crazy, like 200 responses, the majority of which were like, it was a big focus on people who were disabled, whether mentally handicapped or physically, saying there's not enough facilities and resources for us. I run a society, you know, I meet up for people with autism and we can't afford our rent. We'd love a space to meet every other Friday. Or, you know, I run a movement class for people who are physically handicapped, etc. And what's really cool is we were also simultaneously, by coincidence, doing a project for that council. And those two have now connected together, the developer and the council, to say, okay, this is what placemaking actually looks like. This is really it, is listening to a community who are crying out for more facilities for those, you know, who need better accessibility. And how can we work together to create a place that works for them? And I think that's, I love that story of going through to Butcher, that actually now it's become an experience getting that back. I love.
And he tells his mates, and they all do go together now. So yeah, it's like that. It's the placemaking must be a catalyst for community, for people of all ages to actually enjoy their city better and feel that it's for them. Yeah, BCO had a great conference a couple of years ago in Copenhagen, and the transformation in Copenhagen over the past 40 years has been about actually attracting families back into the city centre, so everybody bikes everywhere, and it was an amazing place to visit, I have to say. So in terms of the future, and how could the industry, well, first of all, do you think the construction industry is particularly slow at adapting new tech ideas?
I think that the answer is yes, but I also think in a sense they've been slow to adopt tech in regard to the office, because who would want to fit out a building with new hardware which is bound to become obsolete in the near future? You know, I think that actually in that sense they've been wise to pass on that responsibility for kitting out offices with the latest relevant tech to the occupiers, because they need to be focused on other things. I think what they've been slow to adopt enough is actually focusing on what, and by the way, like I said, the community care about, including employees, which is sustainability. You know, actually, let's innovate. It shouldn't have been such a big deal when, you know, the Bloomberg building was in the City of London was launched. That should have been, well, of course they went to those lengths to try and make it as sustainable as possible. And also increasingly you will find that that's what, especially the younger generations, that's what they prioritize. That's what they want. So as a sort of employer, I know if I rent in a building which is highly, you know, sort of energy efficient and is, you know, hot on terms of sustainability, that's going to help me attract better talent as well. So, and I think the construction industry also has that responsibility to be prioritizing that. You know, we're all obviously in the race for net zero, but I do think they've been slow to really prioritize it. But in terms of tech itself, rather than clean tech, actually office tech, I don't know. I think it's so easy for you blink and something changes. We are a software company, which obviously makes it easier for us because we release a new version of our product every 2 weeks. We work in 2 week sprints, and the product in 3 months' time will be unrecognizable in small but crucial ways to how it is today. You know, if the way what I always say is that if you don't look back on what your product looked like a year ago and feel a little bit ashamed, you're doing something wrong. Now, not then. And so so I think that's a tricky one. I think that
I think it obviously it's just the way you describe the sprint nature of how you're constantly evolving your products and constantly have to think about how do we tweak that, what are our customers telling us, what is the feedback loop, how do we build that in, how do we design improvements, all of that. In a virtual world, that's relatively easy to do, but in a physical world, property is hard to change, it's expensive and creates a lot of waste, and so people won't undertake projects lightly. So maybe it is harder to change, I suppose, which is why perhaps the tech should be separate, you know, and it's a bolt on. Because it's recognizing that it is, and easy to change as well, you know, in the future has to be.
I agree. I think the infrastructure for flexible tech adoption, that's what matters. You know, I think nowadays, I think something interesting that I was that I was reading the other day, and I was like, that's a good point. That would have been made my old office that, actually I cancelled my lease on it, and sort of 6 months ago, and now I'm looking for a completely different type of office space come the autumn. But actually what's interesting as I was reading was it was saying how, power and data modules on everything from benches to breakfast bars, they make every space a touchdown point. And that's really what we should be looking at. It's not actually the latest tech itself, because that's going to change by the time from when you start constructing when you finish, it's gone. It's changed. But actually those touch points, actually thinking about how do we have enough infrastructure for it, that's, I think, where the responsibility really lies. Is giving the ability for that to happen,
and making it as flexible as possible, because things are going to change, layouts are going to change. What is your view about COVID-19, and do you think it's been a catalyst for change? I mean, it's a dreadful situation. I don't want to belittle that at all. The health issues that we've had to suffer, but do you see that as a catalyst for change and adoption of tech? And
I think that certainly it took a global shutdown, a global pandemic, for employers to finally have to learn to work remotely and let people have that flexibility to work in a way that, for many people, not everyone, for many people, is a far more productive way to work, and actually lets them have a far better work-life balance. So I think that certainly it has led to a big adoption of technology. We have gone from being, on the planning side, a tool which is, I always said it's complementary to how you would talk to that NIMBY minority, which is typically older, retired, middle-class professionals. To actually being now, they've become more tech savvy, and now actually we're the only way for you to communicate with the decision makers, and therefore we're working for that silent majority, making them less silent, and also actually the people that previously would have been in person. So certainly I think it's accelerated rapid adoption in some ways. In other ways, I think it's actually, tech is just we're just an enabler. I always say that, tech is only as good as how you use it, which sounds really silly, but it's amazing how often we forget that. Actually, it's more about the fact that our ways of working, I only want to have an office space now for collaboration and for actually coming together, and for people's mental and physical wellness. It's much more important to me that my office space has a room for people to, do exercise when they want to, than that they have, a sort of their own set desk, because they can do the stuff at their own set desk at home. When they come to the office, I expect them to be there to collaborate and to work and, to come together. That's the point. So I think that's when I see tech as, yes, it's really, really ramped up adoption in some respects, but also it's just because it's one piece of a much bigger picture of change.
No, absolutely. It's interesting. I think certainly speaking from our perspective, we've noticed that we've grown during lockdown, but we're probably less profitable, actually, because design is harder when everybody's working from home. So I'm in the office today. Don't tell the Scottish government, but I'm in the office today, and I have been for the past 2 days, because we've needed to get together to talk about design, and it's just easier when it's almost like osmosis, when you're in a room with others working on similar projects. That's a great idea. Where's that come from? Oh, just that exchange of knowledge and idea generation is just so much easier when you're together. So getting a balance, I think, is really important.
I think so.
But we're seeing some clients are saying that it's actually accelerated cultural evolution. So they've moved perhaps from a parent-child management structure to something that's much more autonomous, much more trust-based, and that has been very positive. And I'm doing a couple of projects in Scotland at the moment where that has been reported. So organisations that had really quite processed systems, whether it was contact centres or whatever, staff are now trusted to work from home. Therefore, their life's easier. Therefore, they can manage their kids and their family easier, and they're noticing they're actually reporting a real positive kind of cultural benefit from it as well. But still wanting to have that office as somewhere that has the purpose of the values of the organization, and place where people are, just as you said, where people can come together and collaborate and feel part of a bigger thing, rather than just sitting in your daughter's bedroom, which is most of the time that's where I am, that kind of thing.
But I do think, somewhat controversially though, we may actually also see more monitoring technology, checking whether we're really working when we say we are. And I think that I get why that's necessary, and that we have some sort of some of our tech team do that already. They always have their own volition, because it really helps when you're managing the pipeline. Well, how long did it take to do that sort of task?
Sure.
Now we know whether that's one to push to the top, or whether, well, only five people have, actually really want that change, and it's a real time investment. Let's maybe not do that now. But I think, so the technology's there. It's, will people now be looking to implement it? I hope not, because I agree with you. I think there's something really empowering about just, I always say when someone joins my team, look, you have to own your own schedule. You want to have a nap at 3 p.m, you want to go to the gym, you want to go on a nice walk, you do you. If I can't trust you to do what's best for your own productivity and work, I've hired the wrong person. And I think that, so I've sort of mixed feelings about that. But I do think we're, as everyone thinks, we're never going back. We did a survey recently for the City of London about, return to the city, essentially. And what was really interesting is, I think it was like 50% worked every day from the city before, of the sort of 5,000 people that responded. And when they were then asked, when the rules allow,
Change.
how often will you use the square mile for work, every day was only 16%. So that was quite astonishing. And the same went for business owners. There was hundreds of business owners, because we sort of segment it by your relationship to the city, and they said the same. I think theirs went down to sort of 34% rather than 16. But again, even people who own those businesses are like, we don't need to be using this space all the time. And I really think that, the co-working companies like WeWork, I've always felt, for me, it didn't make sense that I have to pay per person. I feel like, because actually what's far better is actually being able to bring together when they need it. Everyone doesn't need to be in the office all day, every day together. It should actually be, you have a certain amount of, sort of chips, so to speak, tokens, and you use up your monthly tokens. So you have that freedom of not feeling like your manager is going to be, or your boss is going to be breathing down your neck, that they're paying for you to have an empty seat in that office every bloody day. That's kind of annoying, as someone who's footing the bill. Versus actually having that flexibility to say, all we care about is that you're working whatever's going to be most productive for you and for the company. But I mean, I'm fascinated to hear. I know I shouldn't be asking questions, but
no, it's fine.
From your perspective, do you now see clients saying, we want this to be a social space, a collaborative space, or are they actually saying, we want to have a hell of a lot of actually breakout acoustic, booths for people to have Zoom meetings from here?
It varies. It varies. We've got some clients that are actually quite far down the road in taking their business with them, actually. So we've got one client who has had two existing buildings and actually consolidated into one. So they reduced their net internal area, because they constantly questionnaired and stayed in touch with their teams and said, how do you want to work in the future? So maybe 3 monthly questionnaires went out to staff, so they were understanding how opinions were changing as lockdown extended. And but what they did was they developed a series of personas. So they recognized that they had a big finance team which did a lot of fairly complex processing work, and they needed to be together as a team, but work quietly together. So it was like a big team table where they could all work away with the spreadsheets or whatever, and say, can you just have a quick look at this? So they developed an app which helped them manage the headcount in the building. And then that informed the types of settings people needed. And then we looked at the existing footprint and understood what we needed to take away and what we needed to supplement. So that level of, I suppose, relatively sophisticated engagement and understanding was fed back to the teams, so they totally could imagine themselves in the space. Don't know if that answered your question, but yeah, some clients are a bit like us. If they're design based, we need to be we need to be together when we're designing. If we're writing specification, perhaps we can be at home. Or, if we're writing lots and lots of papers, we can be at home. If we're doing emails, we can be at home. So clients are different in the way they're approaching it, which is interesting in itself, actually.
Makes your job harder but more stimulating.
Well, yeah, but design's not meant to be easy. I mean, it's much more rewarding if you create real value, by really engaging with your clients. So that's essentially what floats my boat in a way.
I suppose it's the same as what I said about, if you don't look back and think, God, what were we thinking that was a great product a year ago for you? If it's easy, you're not doing it right.
Well, that's
you
right.
want it to be a challenge.
I know. There's another way of saying that. It's a Scottish way. If it doesn't hurt, you're no doing it right. And I don't know if I fully agree with that. It's a bit of a West of Scotland thing, I think. So just one last point then from me. So how should the industry be connecting with young people? I mean, I've got two daughters in their 20s. One of them still on furlough, the other one doing a master's. But they're thinking, what's the future for us? So how should the industry connect better to younger people? Because you are the future.
Well, so firstly, I think that in terms of when they're as your end users, that's really what Give My View focuses on. Is we focus on all sorts of, sort of I suppose underrepresented groups and decision making, but actually meeting them on their terms, I think, is very important. Even when we're doing our user testing of new designs, I have, my team members who have teams, etc., send it to them. I'm looking to put together a youth council of people from all different diverse backgrounds who are younger to actually say, would you engage with this? Because they use different apps that I've never even been on TikTok, never mind whatever they're using now. And I'm only 29, so you can't underestimate actually listening to them, but listening to them on their terms. Don't expect them to work on your terms. In terms of actually getting them into the industry, which is the real way for them to be a force for change for us. I think the Kickstarter initiative is fantastic. I think that we need to also be really focused on trying to get more diverse talent into the sector, because and that doesn't just mean younger, but I think especially helping young people get a foot in the door into our sector is very important. And that is something I'm looking to hopefully set up for my own organization if it works for others, actually getting people who are, from more economically sort of disenfranchised backgrounds. Even in for like you could do like an accelerator program, get them in for 8 weeks, but give them something tangible. Don't when I remember doing an internship and I sat there reading a book this thick, thinking I'm not helping anyone, nor am I helping myself. Actually give them a project to be proud of, because learning from them, actually hearing, well, what would you want from an office space? What would be your dream office room? And seeing what that looks like. Well, that's really helpful, because your clients can be trying to attract more diverse talent now. And so actually understanding people, it's very easy if you come from a privileged background to imagine sitting in an open plan room and shouting across the room, hi, Todd, come over here and tell me what you think of this. But if you suffer from imposter syndrome, the chances are you're going to just shut up, you're going to be very overwhelmed, and you're not actually going to have that same level of collaboration in that open space where you have to be an extrovert. So my big thing is actually getting them into your businesses. It's not just about ticking that box of, look how clever we are supporting diversity and inclusion. It's actually going to make you do a better job in your work. And I really believe that for what we do as well. Because you'll be designing for, for the future generations. That's what we're all doing, essentially.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And I think giving them something tangible to take away as well. So actually, if you have them in your business and you're asking them about giving them a project to do that they can then have as evidence, and they can talk about that in future interviews and all of and that kind of thing. I mean, as I said, we've grown by about 10 probably over the last year, and induction's been tricky, and so that's another reason to get people into the office, is actually to do a face-to-face, so you understand how tall people are. Like one girl was like 5'11". I didn't know that. but it's it's meeting face-to-face does make a big difference and help people understand
but also,
what the business needs.
Not having to be in the office all the time can be quite powerful, because there's some people who they can't afford to live in the lovely sort of places where the offices are going to be. So actually being able to commute once a week, and you have to get up at 6 a.m, 5 a.m, whatever it may be, to leave your house and get into the office, versus being expected to do that every day. That can be very powerful as well. Actually, in a way, it's working from home is not an equalizer, because you can't tell me it's the same experience working from your lovely terraced house with a garden versus working from a studio flat, in terms of how it allows you to be productive. But equally, working remotely does actually let people who live in places where they're far less accessible to get to an office, to be able to be on an even playing field and not be exhausted by the time they arrive to work. They've already been up 4 hours. So yeah, and I'm a big believer in the sprints. Like I said, it's sort of my vision is that I would love to be able to have a cohort of sort of underprivileged young people come in, and actually they're there for like a 6 or 8 week sprint, where, like you said, at the end they have like a demo day, same as you would in a tech accelerator, where you present what you've come up with to a panel of experts. You've had mentors along the way, and by mentors I mean business mentors. I think it's very important we don't try and be sort of mentors as if we're a charity, because you can do more damage than good if you're not well trained to work with young people who've had potentially traumatic experiences in their past. and you get something out of it, and like you said, they get something out of it,
Yeah.
something to put on that CV that they've
Yeah.
actually something tangible they've done. So and the government will help pay for it. I mean, it's just a win-win for everyone, isn't it?
Yeah. No, it's fantastic. Savannah, I think we're out of time. Thanks so much. And I think that's us. Good
Well,
luck
thank you
with your
so much.
continued ventures. And you never know, I might reach out if we've got a project that we need some help with.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, I know I was sort of thinking you were going to be like, yeah, has COVID been good or bad for you? And I was going to be like, well, you know, we were looking just as COVID hit to expand into occupier engagement, to then find there were no occupiers to engage with in the buildings. So hopefully, yeah, people will soon be occupying buildings again for us to move on to that.
Yeah, they will be, and they will need more diverse, more interesting spaces, I think.